Today is day 4,437 that Boswell Book Company has been in business. And I am really pleased to welcome Yelena Moskovich, who was born in Ukraine and immigrated to Wisconsin with her family in the early 90s. She's an international playwright and performer. Her work's been performed here in the United States, up above in Canada, across the water in France and in Sweden. She's author of a bunch of books, The Natashas, Virtuoso, and her brand new novel, which I'm halfway through and loving right now. I call it kind of a bit of down the rabbit hole mystery set in Milwaukee. It is a door behind a door. And she's going to be here to chat today with Kate Zambreno. And if you don't know Kate Zambreno, I'll introduce her too. She's the author of 8 books, including Screen Test, Green Girl, Heroines, and she's the Strachan Donnelly Chair in Environmental Writing at Sarah Lawrence and teaches in Columbia's MFA program as well. Her latest works, and I'm going to say works because I've got a couple of them here, are Drifts, the novel, and again, I'm not going off copy here. I'm calling it a cross-genre memoir, and she can correct me and tell me I'm terribly wrong. A cross-genre memoir by way of failed literary study called To Write as If Already Dead. Please give them both a warm welcome. I think we're going to enjoy this conversation quite a bit, so I'm going to disappear for you. Internet claps, welcome.
Hi, Yelena.
Hi, Kate.
It's nice to meet you virtually.
I know, this is like a weird blind reveal and event all in one.
And it's 9 o'clock in Paris and it's like 3 o'clock in New York now. Yeah. So you're in like evening brain and
yeah,
I'm in afternoon brain.
I think we'll just take like the average and I think we'll be perfectly placed.
Do you want to read it? Do you want to start off by reading a little bit first?
Yeah. Awesome. I love that you both have copies. I haven't yet received my copy.
Oh, yeah? I'll be the spokesmodel then.
Thank you for holding that up. If you want to hold your copy, there we go. So we'll do that. But it's on its way. It's because international postage is different these days. So I'm just going to read the first couple pages of the novel, and I think I'll just get into it and not say anything about it, and then if it feels wrong, I'll say more afterwards. Nikki, Nikolai, floor 6. I was a fat baby. I was lying in my crib like an egg yolk. The old lady was upstairs on floor 6, her dining room above our bedroom. She dropped to the floor and made our ceiling lamp sway. Oh no, oh no, oh no. There was a punctured scream. It wheezed, it lacked its high notes. It fell out of her mouth like a dog's tongue. The boy, his footsteps were soft as rain and scared and stupid down the stairs. Goodbye. She was left to lie there, 3 wounds, her head flopped against her forearm, leaking. Floor 5. Nikolai Nishisliva lived on floor 5 like us. He was much older than me, but also far from adulthood, mulling, teenaged. He must have had a groin filling with pubic hair, a mother with eyes that could mourn raspberries, no father, and the street dog that he was supposed to leave alone, Vaska. He snuck him in and gave him meat bones and let him sleep under his bed every now and then. Listen, like us, they were nothing special. Everyone knew, but the old lady, she was different. She was good. I'm sorry, I can't say her name. I'm afraid I'll call her back from the dead. No one who left this world unjustly comes back with a clear head. Let's just call her the old lady, okay? Misery had already come to her. She wore the black veil for her one and only son who drowned in Odessa at age 10. Her husband had passed away a couple years before, an immune system anomaly. They say men leave. They say women mourn. She lived our proverbs. But you know what? She didn't grow bitter. She didn't become hard. She continued to look fondly at children, because all children were innocent in her eyes, even the child who accidentally horseplayed her son to death that August years ago, even the one who would grow up to be the poor soul to stab her thrice, Nikki. Nikki, softness. How long must we carry it as affliction? Speak up. Nikki was 14 when I was just over a year old. I watched him from my mother's arms with globular brown eyes. He was cuffed. He was smacked around by the militaire, the cop. His mama ran down the stairs crying. Mama's tears. He's just a boy. He's just a boy, but boys don't stab old women once, twice, thrice. That, my daragaya mamasha, is intentional manslaughter, the cop said. But he didn't mean it, she's crying. Of course he didn't mean to, just ask him. She's spreading her fingers wide into the officer's face. It was an accident. The cop turns to the boy. He pushes him against the railing. He says, speak up, malchik. Did you mean it? Bad boy. Nikki was a bad boy, and he went to prison to become a bad man. And I'll leave it at that.
That's great. And for those, so I don't know if you can see how it's kind of laid out on the page for those, because there's like this, I want to ask you about the form. So, I mean, I feel like Virtuoso was so many experiments with form that felt like horizontal to me, like across sections, like every section felt like a sort of experiment in voice and experiment in form. And this feels like a vertical building, right? Like the apartment building that it begins with, or the courtyard that it begins with. But, and it's kind of like, they're like these titles, they're kind of like voices. There is this like interplay. And is that what came first with this, the form, the way these like fragments played with each other?
Yeah, I think I was well, first of all, I feel like form precedes function for me. I think I'm really interested, like every novel, I want to figure out like how language is going to live in order to sort of reach out and invite the reader, you know, into something that feels alive and doesn't feel, I don't know, like just inherited or kind of just told, like, and it has that kind of, that little bit of tingle in some way. And I think for this one, I was really interested. I was playing around with this idea of like the novel in verse, and, you know, like as a Slavic person, you really grew up on like Pushkin and like our sort of the heritage of the form of poetry and that sort of ultimate pride of, you know, like my mother always used to say, well, American poetry, that's not poetry. That's just people feeling things and writing it down, because it's so much about structure, you know, it's so much about like this mathematical virtuosity in construction. And so for me, it wasn't as much about that, but there's something in that. And I think there's something in the way that poetry is able to recreate time that feel like I'm always kind of like muddling around in that same way but with prose or with whatever a novel is. Like, I don't want to necessarily write poetry. I don't want to make a poetry collection, but I want to figure out how, you know, how a novel can stretch time beyond. I mean, also thinking, you know, to even like kind of the Greek terminology for time, that it was sort of beyond just the chronological conception, but it's also, it encompasses not only what is eternal, but also like the right time to know when is the right time to act. And there's something about poetry or lyricism that it acts always on the right time. And then I feel like with prose over time, it's not that we got lazy, but we forget that prose also has to act on the right time. Like just because there's more words, you know?
There's like a sudden quality in what you're doing. Like I'm thinking about like Danny Harms too. Like there's a suddenness to the way that the titling happens, or this like choral interaction that's happening that does have this like, we are in this time now. We're in the time of like the space of whatever page we're in. Like you're kind of like snapping it to attention.
Yeah. And it's funny that you say like sudden, because I was thinking about, you know, something that I felt you know, in kinship with your writing is this kind of like reworking over and over of like, what is the present tense?
Mhm.
And even though I feel like, you know, we're kind of searching in our own way about it, but there is something very similar in like, okay, but what is, you know, like true being is becoming. So as soon as you're
Mhm.
there, if you're not already becoming something else, it's like, has it died, you know?
Mhm.
And that's sort of like the livelihood. And there's something about, you know, the way that you're trying to stretch out awareness, and like, can storytelling be aware of itself and also be aware
Mhm.
of the person that's speaking and be aware of the person that's receiving, and kind of this like, you know, house of mirrors thing.
Even just the idea of like voice, right? Like how voice can act, like voice versus character, right? And I think it's interesting
Yeah.
that I want to hear about your see, I mean, we both, in a way, I think you much more in a legitimate way, but we both come from a theater background. And I was way more interested in performance and theater before I started writing novels. And I think my early work came from that, like, love of physical theater, love of performance art. I would love to hear about your background, because I get that. I mean, obviously in Virtuoso, there's also like storylines dealing with theater and performance, and there's references to Artaud. And then of course we get this chorea poem with the new one. Or I also thought about like, there's almost like this buoyant acerbic Sarah Kane quality, I thought, to the new one, right?
Yeah.
With this
Oh,
monologue that's like a
yeah.
series of dialogues, and like the spoken from the dead, the spoken from the floorboard sort of feel to it. But I would love to hear about your background in theater and how you see performance in theater kind of infecting your work.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love that you mentioned Sarah Kane, because it's like, you know, if I hit that register for anyone, it's like, okay, and now I can exit this world with some sense of
Well,
peace.
what is it? Is it in Blasted? There's that stage direction, which is impossible, like the daisy growing through the
Oh,
floorboards. There's
yeah,
something
yeah.
quite
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
something quite Russian about that, right? Like
Yeah.
I feel like she has this like absurdist wit, like a flower
Yeah.
grows through the floorboards when these characters who
Yeah.
are so in these paroxysms of love and hatred and cruelty die. I definitely get that vibe from your work.
Yeah. And this sense of, I guess, repetition, that's something that, you know, I'm kind of obsessed with your first novel, Oh Fallen Angel, and I teach it. I kind of shove it down the throat of my students. I teach it every
It's
year.
It's an unpleasant work.
I love it. I usually do it as like the first book, so they know where I stand. You know, it's like, it's a way, you know how like dogs will like put their paw, like that's basically what I do with the students. Despite my small stature, I try to kind of like use the power of books to, but yeah, I think so. Well, my background in theater, also to say, I don't think anyone in theater ever feels credible, no matter what you do. But in fact, I've always felt a lot more peaceful as an author, like just as a prose writer. In theater, I've always been like, I don't know who, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I basically, I wanted to be an actor when I was really young, and then met with that beautiful, harsh reality that it's actually just about the way that you look if you're trying to act when you're like, you know, 12, which is like all you can get is commercials. Like I would go in with like just inappropriate, you know, when you're reading a monologue.
What monologues did you do when you were 12?
I think I did like Night Mother. Do you know that? It's about a middle-aged woman who locks the door and her mom's trying to get in, and the woman who's like turning, you know, 40, 42 or what. At that age, I was like, she's so old.
Crone.
She basically, the daughter tells her mother she's going to kill herself, and the whole play is the mom convincing.
You're auditioning for Hostess Cupcakes with a middle-aged suicide monologue.
And I most likely did like the mom's role, like not even, you know what I mean? So I was like, they'll see beyond it because it's about my essence, you know? So I felt, so basically very early on, I was like, every single like kind of reading material, whatever I was given for my age group, I was like, I can't, what is this? And I remember being in like a high school acting class, and the teacher was like, well, if you don't like it, why don't you write your own? I was like, okay, well, maybe I will. And I started playwriting and I just fell in love with it. And I wrote like so many plays during my teens, which is also a testament to how I was dealing with my teens, you know.
In Milwaukee. In
Yeah,
Milwaukee.
yeah. How I was dealing with the outside world, basically not like locked myself between myself and my like old like IBM computer. But yeah, and then basically I was always interested in experimental forms. Like, long story short, I got really into like physical theater. I did my bachelor's in playwriting, but kind of looking for how to write for kind of physical and collaborative experiences. And then when I moved to Paris, I did École Jacques Lecoq, which is like a physical theater school. And then after that, I did a master's in sort of the more theoretical view on the things that I was studying at Jacques Lecoq, which was a lot about figuring, or I guess exploring the composition of language in space and how those same kind of vectors work on the page, and kind of figuring out the different, you know, the 3D versus kind of 2D composition of like of thinking about things basically beyond the narrative. Like, how can we construct true dynamics, which is, I guess, something, you know, that's something that really spoke to me in Drifts, because that's a question that comes up over and over again. It's like, well, how do, you know, it's how do we tell a story that is, that doesn't, you know, that is free from even having even our own authorship. There's a certain, it's hard to describe, but I think like maybe all my life I'm chasing like a form of freedom,
like that desire of what the space of the page could do. Like the potentials, if you could just like see beyond it for some potential.
Yeah, and also I think, maybe, I don't know how it is for you, but I think the key for me when exploring that is realizing that I'm not in this alone, that there's something going on between me, my solitude, and the reader's solitude.
Yeah.
And how we're gonna be intimate together eventually in this like imaginary solitude, combined solitude, I don't know.
And like being aware of that, and being aware of persona, and being aware of that, like, I think that you play so deliciously with, I mean, your work isn't alienating, but, and not that alienating is a bad value to work, but you play so much with awareness of this like triangulation with the reader being spectator, I think. Like you're very, I feel like, especially in this new work, the narrative voice, those titles, and is it a choral voice? Is it this sort of stand-in for the author? It's very teasing, it's very provoking, it's very we are in it like a trance.
And I think that there's like, maybe it has a bit of a, I don't know, like maybe like a Brechtian sort of intention where you just kind of want to, in a way, acknowledge, it's, you know, it's actually acknowledging a reality. I so often, like, I don't know, people, or like my work is described as like surreal or magical or whatever, but it's like very, but I'm actually looking for it to be very real.
Yeah, it's very grounded in the body, I think.
Yeah.
Like I think that, I mean, I think it's so much about like gesture and bodies and this sort of, and time, bodies and time, which is, of course, you know, it's interesting thinking about other novelists who play so much with prose in the space of the page. I'm thinking like the Vienna group, like Elfriede Jelinek or Thomas Bernhard. They also started out as actors and playwrights. So there's something to that, I think, like this awareness of theatricality, a desire to enter a novel, but sort of dismantle narrative, how can you dismantle story while still having a sense of a narrative? I mean, you definitely, your work has such this noirish crime quality to it, while also feeling so fractured and so, I read a lot of the reviews that said surreal. I think there are like surreal moments that feel magical to me. It's more like like this like stagecraft that happens in them more than like any pure surreal moment. I mean, there's definitely surreality, but I thought more of like the body, desire, even the grotesque as sort of grounding it.
Yeah, I wonder how much like, people that really work with form, how much of it is sort of like, this is a bit of an interjection, but like, part of becoming an adult is that, that cut that we make with our parents. And so we sort of have to do the same thing culturally. So it's like, but that happens at a completely different age. And so I feel like part of, for me to like reach my own adulthood was also to redefine kind of my Slavicness, my Russian, like that kind of sort of cultural inheritance that I had. And so I think a lot of it deals with, questions that, moral questions that we ask the soul, which is completely paradoxical because the soul cannot respond to moral questions. And I feel like that's sort of the platform of Russian literature. And that's sort of how, because they did something that was impossible, they could put whatever they want into it. And so, which is also like oddly enough, very queer. So in a sense, I was like, okay, well, now I have to, now this is a time for me to make it Slavic and queer or whatever, because now, I'm American or I'm French or, to redefine it, but you can't really escape those cultural roots. Like no matter how, I remember thinking like, oh, I'm so American. And then just no, like, I mean, I can be my accent or whatever, but when you get into like the mind of minds, it's such I don't know how you feel like in terms of your cultural like parenting.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, first I want to talk about your work because I think that's what's so intriguing about A Door Behind a Door and Virtuoso. I haven't read the Natashas yet. I really want to read it. Is I feel like there is that like soul and there is that like tradition of Russian literature that you're engaging with intensely. Like you, even beyond reference, there's a sense of like the polyphonic cast of characters, the sense of hierarchy. Like, you wrote in an essay, every Russian novel is a crime novel. So there is that like engagement. There's in this, I think, what is it? Is it the Brothers Karamazov you keep on reference? No, Crime and Punishment, Crime and Punishment, right? And you get the like the Eugenie Onegin sense of like a verse poem, etc. And then also like, very queer too, that there is such this inheritance with queer literature, but it's almost like you are taking this and deconstructing it while still preserving the elements. So there is a sense of engaging with history and the ghosts of history while also moving forward with these like new communities that feel very transnational, that feel like people without a community finding a community, like that search, even when your characters are so isolated, you put them together in the world of your work. So even if they are very alienated or isolated, there's still this like casts of disobedience that is at once old world. There's that line of yours. It's like old world slapstick. That the old world is without place and time. So there is this very. It is, that's why it feels so theatrical to me, because you are playing so much with time, which is of course also the consideration of the novel. I definitely think if we're going to talk about O Fallen Angel is very much deals with the Midwest, I think. And I definitely think, I mean, it's not my parents. It's funny, like the first two works that came out that were more novels, everyone assumed was very autobiographical, which I don't know if you get with your work as well. There are some points of like I grew up in the Midwest. But yeah, for a while I thought of those works as like Midwestern Gothic, like this Midwestern grotesque. And I think it's one of the reasons I was so interested in Elfriede Jelinek and Bernhard, because I felt like, where is the literature about like hypocrisy and Catholic judgmentalness, and this is also, the Bush era, and where is the literature that's about, exploding against being this like docile,
Yeah.
good subject.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I mean, that's something that I really appreciate in that novel. And I think in all of your work, actually, that there is this sense of anger that, I don't know, that I think is so important, and that I try, that basically I realized I didn't know, people that are watching this and that haven't read the novel have no clue what even happens, which is kind of amazing. Like they've done, but like in short, that it's this, there was a 10-year-old boy that stabs this old woman 3 times in the Soviet Union. And then there's this baby that watches, that lives on the same floor. That baby becomes Olga, moves to the States, falls in love with this American girl, Angelina. They live in Milwaukee. And then out of the blue, she gets a call from Nikolai, who was the boy, who basically says that he's in America and that he's going to hell. And she's like, why, why are you in America then? And he says, to go to hell, they take you through America. There's a door behind a door. And so that kind of opens up a whole kind of metaphysical, like Russian mafia that is going to be navigated where the characters go.
But there's also such an instability too so you've presented that as story and that's all there, but there's such this intriguing instability about what does happen and multiplicity, and this sense of like influx, fluidity, multiplicity feels so incredibly new.
Yeah. I think it's because it's like, well, and maybe it goes back to the Brechtian thing. It's like, I'm not trying to pass anything on as real or a dream or whatever, it's like, I'm going to just keep asking the same questions that the reader is asking, and the characters are asking that question. And actually, that's probably the most accurate example of our sense of being, because I don't know about other people. I think it's especially during the time of COVID, but even before, like I wake up almost daily trying to understand, why am I alive? Like, what am I doing here? What are we doing here? Are we I don't know. I mean, I know I'm an overthinker, so it could be that, but I do think that level of thinking, whether you call it anxiety or, like the anxious body, like that is present, that lives with us. And yet we write these like polished narratives where all of a sudden we have a lucidity between our intentions and our, overarching goal and whatever, but that's not real,
I agree. Yeah. And I think I love how your characters as well engage in these metaphysical questions, especially like there's such moments of, like, to go back to Sarah Kane, there's so much moments in your work amidst a lot of violence at times. There's such moments of and alienation and just kind of existing. There's so much like states of just existing into like kind of like the trap you're born in. But there's such moments of beauty, even if it's just the beauty of the language. Like that moment that you read, I didn't underline it, but that moment you read, softness, how long must we carry it as affliction? I thought that, I mean, that's just so incredibly, it's like this moment of, it's this like pocket or bubble of space in an otherwise like our existence, right? And to as a reader to enter that space of beauty, there's something so wonderful about it. And I also really, like your work is also like full of such visceral desire and pleasure, which I think, is really quite beautiful. Is that like a conscious desire in terms of to write so many moments of physical pleasure, especially among in like a queer, among queer bodies?
I think, I mean, it's, something in this world, there's this kind of fluctuation between who's alive and who's dead. And some people are dead and then come back up. There's like a diner in Milwaukee where people kind of have a second and a third life and a fourth. And then there, I think of the character of Tanya, who is kind of one of my favorites and is definitely like straight out of Sarah Kane. And she's maybe dead, up to whoever to read to decide, maybe dead, but definitely horny, very horny, and
very horny.
very horny, and is pissed, and is so pissed that she has to be horny, and at the same time doesn't really know, it doesn't know what to do. Part of her horniness is the anger itself. And I think this is the thing where there is definitely a lot of, I don't know if it's like even sex, like what is, there's a lot of like bodies that are trying to speak, but there's also a lot of violence. And sometimes it's like even the line where like Nikolai says like when he's young and all the boys are kind of beating up on each other. And he says like, what's the difference between like me and a smack? Like, what's the difference between someone who smacks and someone who receives it? Like who, like, why are we these like dominating games? And there's the same like dominational structure is in every, as soon as you kind of, put power into the mix. And so I think at the heart of it is, even though Tanya doesn't vocalize it in this way, I think it's this understanding that I want my desire, like I want to like fucking get it out of this dominational structure, but I can't. And so part of
she's
the
pissed. Tanya's pissed. Yeah,
she's really pissed, and
she's
I love it. She's like my character that I just really, and the thing is like her, and she has her best friend, her bestie Sveta, who like is homophobic and kind of hates her and kind of loves her, and they like fucking hate each other and fucking love each other. And that's also their language of desire, because there is this, and this is something that like I think is really important for me. In sometimes when you represent some sort of marginalized community, you have this like pressure to only represent it in this kind of ambassadorial light, or this like kind of moral light. And the thing about like, queer love and queer desire is that we have that we're still working through and dealing with the language of violence. And that is very much integrated in the way that we desire and the way that we long, either violence towards ourselves or violence towards other people. And there's nothing, not only that there's nothing wrong with that, but like we need to, I don't know, it's that for me needs to be there. It's not, there is a lot of like between Remy and Misha, who sometimes goes by Moisha. Those are probably like the most tender, kind of ambiguous homoerotic moments. But the women
there's such tenderness, and there's tenderness amidst sometimes a lot of brutality.
Yeah, and I mean, even like the scene where Tanya and Sveta are sort of, they get a little pissed at each other, and they're arguing, and then they're wrestling, and then they're hitting each other and biting, and then they're kind of grinding at each other, and then they're kind of into it, and then it's fluid. So it's like, it's that, I don't know, that surge of energy, like what do we do with it? Because in a sense it is life, like, and I think this is something that maybe like Tanya is fighting for, or some of like that horniness is her way of living, even though that she's dead.
Horniness is her credo.
Yeah. It's like her life energy. It's the thing that's left, Yeah.
But it's weird though. I mean, do you watch any TV? Do you watch some TV?
I watch no TV. No, of course I watch TV. Yeah. Can you imagine?
I just read by candlelight. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
but I was thinking, I was reading your work, and I was thinking of the kill your gays trope, which I don't think your work does. Have you heard that, like this idea that the lesbians are always killed off on shows, like the queer characters are always the one killed off. And I felt like your work, even though there is such violence, that you do allow, I mean, thinking also in Virtuoso, like you allow these moments, you allow joy, and I think you allow, even with a lot of darkness, I think you allow release.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of, I mean, in A Door Behind a Door, like, there are some queer people that maybe die, but a lot of people die over and over again. So it's right. Not like death is not the same. But but even in Virtuoso, I think just being able to, it's this weird thing where, of course, you don't want to fall into that trope, but then again, death is also a part of queer experience, and so yeah, it's just being integral and in being able to, portray, having a character just be, live their life outside of their tokenism or whatever.
So one of the things I'm always very interested in is how long ago, so I just want to look at the time. So my phone makes this very robotic sound whenever I touch it because it's super broken. It sounds like a robot. But how long ago did you write A Door Behind a Door? I'm always really curious, like how recent a work is, or whether you're in new work right now that's like very distinct.
So Door Behind the Door was actually a short story for a while. Like I wrote it up, I don't know, like maybe like 6 years ago or something.
It was a short story, or like you saw it as a series of short stories?
No, it was just a short story that I wrote, and then it was just like a weird length. It was already a weird story and a weird length. And I really loved it. And I like tried to send it to magazines, and they didn't feel the same way that I did. So I just put it in the drawer. And then I think maybe a year and a half ago, I took it back out and I was rereading it. Cause you go through these cycles where like, I really need to send out more stuff. Maybe I'll win an award, like you try to encourage yourself to get out there and make money or whatever you can do, your skill set. But, so yeah, I was doing one of those and I was like, come on, there must be something that's worth something in this drawer, like one of those.
Is it an actual drawer like you're looking at and like pulling it out of this drawer?
I would love it. Just like, how much is this worth, sir? No, but I started reading it. And then as I was reading it, I was just kind of rewriting it. And I was like, it's meant to be a novel. And that way I can just publish it and no magazine can tell me no, because I'll just either publish it or not. Like, I don't have to go through that. Medium. I think
that's why I wrote long books for so long, because I felt like it allowed me to just exist in the space of writing as opposed to being rejected and sending out stuff. I think that's kind of why for so long I bypassed shorter forms, because I thought, I want to exist in this world as long as possible before dealing with publishing.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to say I bypassed shorter forms, but what I did is I just wrote a lot of them and never got anything published. And then like now actually I've like been because I finished this like last year, so when books come out it's like a little but I just finished a collection of short stories, and it's kind of I love it because this is all the stuff that I've been writing that never got, a couple of them got published here or there, but so finally I'm like, okay, is 3 novels enough to publish a short story collection? Like now we'll be doing like one of those. So cross our fingers, but
exciting. Is it also set in the Midwest and also?
No, this one is all over the place. It's it's I'm gonna like
you don't want to
say nothing about it but I don't know, did you want to read a little bit of something before we?
Not really. I'd rather listen to you.
Was that my sneaky? No
my
pressure.
Publishers, if they're watching, are just horrified with me. No, I mean, I kind of feel no. I looked through drifts and I thought, no. I mean, I just I feel but one of the things I want to say before we go is that before we ask questions is Virtuoso. I found so many points of connection. I know I'm not supposed to be talking about this book because it's a book that came out earlier, but I've been but also with the softness and A Door Behind a Door, I've been researching foam, and there's so much about foam in Virtuoso.
Oh my God. Actually, I
felt very kindred.
It's funny that you say that, because I remember one of my editorial notes from the UK publisher for the first 2 novels consistently was, I was describing saliva too much and in too much depth, like so
too much viscosity. You have a lot of viscosity.
I do.
I mean, that is a big texture for you.
Yeah, I do and I love people. And this is the thing that I loved about Drifts, which is like a weird point to end on, but I loved all the pooping and farting and the dog, because that's something the people need to have bodies. They need
there's a lot of body fluids in your work as well. For a while, I think someone said to me that like someone takes a shit in like every book I've ever written. And I don't know what that is. I don't know.
Please,
it's like,
please keep it coming.
It's what bodies do. Like, and also like, to puncture into the everyday and to show like even beauty in something that's so
Yeah.
banal. There's something,
Yeah.
even your language of like medical foam, like there's a character in
yeah.
Virtuoso who is a translator for a medical manufacturer company. I felt like you were really, like, I think your work engages so much with trauma and softness and the
Yeah.
desire for softness, but also you're also sort of satirizing the language of softness in late
Yeah.
stage capitalism, like the desire for
Yeah.
softness. And I also felt this, like the sense of maternal grief and grief towards the mother and grief for the mother, like throughout both
Yeah.
of those works.
Yeah, well, it's funny because in Virtuoso, so that the title is actually a reference to a mattress that's a special mattress, and it's like a special kind of like high density foam in the mattress that's made for critical patients that are basically their organs are failing, and it's supposed to kind of align with your body fluids and skin cells and everything to hold you in an optimal position in order to heal or help you get through, whatever. Which is real, and this is a real like Czech manufacturer, that Lynette is real, and that their mattress that actually does this and has these properties is actually called Virtuoso, which I absolutely love.
So many of the textures of the synthetic nowadays, especially as they're commodified, are both so horrifying and beautiful at the same time. And it's like this desire we all have. And I think like with your work, I think there is this sense with the figures in it, this great desire for softness, whether it's, you know, soft bodies, for care, for the maternal, amidst banality or violence or anonymity. So I really thought that I was really drawn to that aspect of it.
Yeah, and this kind of other world, like in Virtuoso, this sort of otherworldly, like this thing that's holding you, which is the foam, which is basically holding you between life and death. And even going back, you mentioned sort of hypocrisy, which I feel like is also a huge kind of thematic motor, because there's something in the relationship between softness and violence, and how even the softness can become violent, and sometimes the violence can become softness, and you're trying to navigate these things, and it feels like one is constantly betraying the other, and it's so impure, like the pure hypocrisy, not even kind of like intellectual or moral hypocrisy, but the
hypocrisy of the body.
Yeah, of your own body, or of you know, one of the questions in A Door Behind a Door is Nicky, who when he stabbed this old woman, he was a 10-year-old boy. He doesn't know why he did it. He doesn't know why this violence kind of like sprung out in him. And Olga, throughout the whole novel, is wondering, does she have the same violence in her? And it's sort of maybe it's a very Slavic question, but it's definitely this, it's beyond, you know, am I good or am I bad? Even though those are also questions that are being asked in the novel, but it's, you know, what is this violence that we all have, and when is it going to spring out? What can we do with it? What's its life force?
Right. The energy, like the idea of a character as being a life force and being an abyss, as opposed to being like a set of characteristics. I feel like that is a really defining feature of your work. Okay, so let me quickly. So if people have questions, please ask questions in the Q&A, and I will ask both of us. I'll ask us these questions. And so we have one question so far, and it kind of connects to something that I was going to ask, and I'm trying to look up the question on my broken phone. So Katya asks, the excerpt you read sounded particularly poetic. What relationship would you say your novel has to poetry? Which you touched on a bit, but I want to even go further. So do people, I felt like when O Fallen Angel came out, people were like, oh, this is kind of poetry. But then the poets were like, no, no, it's not poetry.
They won't have anything.
They won't have it. Yeah. And with Book and Letter too. But what is your relationship to the poets and to poetry now? Your work does have, like, there is the short forms in which, and they're all different. And like, I think your work is definitely in the tradition of various novels and prose. But how do you think of of poetry with your work?
Yeah, I feel like I'm kind of the like that bastard poet that got kicked out of like the poet Eden. And so now I'm free to do whatever I want
Me
because,
too.
because now I feel like it's actually so much better because in poetry, you really like, it's like you really have to make sure it's a poem. But with
Yeah.
prose, like you can actually, I mean, this is what I love about prose is like you can make it a play. Like I have so much dialogue in my
Yeah.
in my work, like probably, I don't know, in like Virtuoso or even in the Natasha is like maybe half of it is dialogue. It's a lot of dialogue. And like, and then kind of, whether it's poetry, just I think it's like for me more it's poetry like in terms of its treatment of time and that poetic space. So it's like how to access that type of space that that includes something that's eternal and also the things that are cyclical. So like eternal, not just forever, but things that, like the seasons or all these like natural things that have their own time and will, even the repetition may seem like it's stuck or, they sculpt time in a different way. And then also the time, this theatrical time, like the time between heaven and hell and earth, like, so I feel like that's sort of the poetry that I work with, and I love, and I think that I'm most free to work with it in the space of prose.
And I think the lineage of the Eastern European poets and their relationship to melancholy and history is so vibrant in your work. And I think this was part of an interview, and I forgive you if it was actually in the book. I think it might have been in the book. I'm not sure. But you quote Joseph Brodsky as writing, "If there is any substitute for love, it is memory." And I feel like that's so, I don't know if you want to speak about that a little bit, but I feel like that's so indicative of what you're performing and the various echoes that are going on in A Door Behind a Door. Yeah,
it's funny that, actually that phrase reminded me of something that I kept thinking during drifts, not at all just to like come back, but no, because the thing, what I really love is this like thinking of, what is life and what is presence? Like, is it our being? Is it our thinking? Like how do we know that we're being? Because so much of, especially like, I don't know about you, but like, there's just like, I have a lot of mental energy. And so a lot of it is just trying to like push it, get it in other places. But then again, sometimes I meet people that have not as much mental energy, but a lot more physical energy. And I sometimes feel envious of them because I'm like, whoa, they must really be living, and so, I feel like it's in a word, like there's something maybe in the solitude of a book where you can actually permit yourself to love in this way, in a way that in life, I feel like when I love in this way, I'm doing it wrong or I'm missing out because I'm a thinker, like I'm a person that observes and thinks. And sometimes I have to be like, maybe you should it's like telling the child to like go outside and play. And the child's like, oh, I'm, thinking about this butterfly. Like they don't know how to, so. I was just thinking of a quote by Baudelaire the other day, that genius is childhood measured with precision. I think there's such like a precision of how you write kind of the originary hurt and trauma and loves of childhood and how they kind of leach into, I think people think as like you get older, you figure things out more. And for me, that has not been my experience at all. Like I get more into the unknowable as opposed to what I know. And I think a novel is a space. I mean, I think one of the things we're kind of saying is like a novel is very capacious and that it can contain plays and dialogue and poetry and metaphysics and philosophy. And it can be this this very polyglot form, which I think is a different tradition of the novel than is often written about or spoken about now, which is so realistic. Yeah, which is actually kind of funny because I often think back, even when I'm like, teach, like I'm required to teach plot, even though I'm like, they make you teach plot. I have to at least like, reference, I have to like, give like the 30 seconds of it or something. But I always kind of go through and discuss like because at the heart of it, basically like novels came from theater, which is in an essence a very kind of polyphonic and communal way of dealing with personal trauma, of giving language to stories and pains and things that we hold in us that we don't know how to release, and we need, and so someone gives us a narrative and we have this kind of gestalt, cathartic moment. And I feel like that there's, when you think about someone that's reading a book, it's so trippy. Like someone is, if you just film them, they're just staring at something in silence and hallucinating, that's what's happening. Like they're like moving in all these ways beyond their body. And that's the space of books. And it's very similar to that, original space. So I do wonder if it's just like, the history, I don't know if it was just like consumerism or the normal things that everyone blames that is, we should I don't know, rightly blame, but like, when did it become so
boring?
So, yeah. And not in a good way, because I kind of like boring, and like boring can be great,
boring as in trans-like or slow.
Like Tarkovsky boring, like I love, but like boring as in like, I would rather just watch a TV series. Like what's
me too.
This doesn't open up a new dimension,
right? And that it can do something different to your brain, that language can do something different to your brain, and that language doesn't have to be just purely delivered, like something that you can just not have to like engage with. One of the things I didn't ask you, and I think we're almost at time, is I was looking at your Instagram, and you're also a visual artist, and and I think one of the things we have in common that we didn't talk about is that we both write about visual art, and we're also like really inspired by visual art for our work. And when I think about form, especially the forms of A Door Behind a Door, they feel physical to me. They feel visual, like the sentence is tactile. It's like something you can see and that you have to access, and you have to like figure out where you are in that landscape. And I think that is just, that's like a different, to me, there's a real ecstasy and thrill to encountering language like that.
I think it's that, like, the visual aspect has always, I don't know, it's not even, I feel like that's what language has always been for, like it's always been 3D, and it's always been like, sometimes my work, people say like, oh, it's very cinematic, but language is cinematic. Like when was language not cinematic? Like, again, we're tripping on words, we're hallucinating. Like there's nothing more cinematic than that. We're creating whole worlds. Like, so I think that there's things, obviously, when you're engaging in like a critical theory, there's things that are probably like, I'm not a neurologist, but activating some different parts of your brain that you can like shut off imagery in order to just kind of ponder ideas or something like that. But at the same time, maybe not, because even when you, I don't know, like even thinking about like Roland Barthes or these type of people, it's very, he's very much like a poetic writer, so maybe not a good example, but
and he wanted to be a novelist, right? He has desire to be a novelist.
So I think it's also like, I don't know, the deliciousness of language, and even when it's that it's just it is very sensual, and it's not like sensual, and not necessarily in that like pretty feminine whatever way. It's sensual in all its grimy, like viscousy every way. Like it's very alive. And for me, sometimes I feel the most alive, like more alive, when I'm kind of immersed in language, writing or reading. Sometimes when I'm in real life, I'm like, oh, okay, how do I remember, be present? Like I do my little mental be present things.
Yeah. Well, it's such a pleasure to finally kind of meet you over the screen. I love that this has been a meeting and getting to know. We're in a Zoom meeting.
In a Zoom meeting. Well,
your work is so beautiful. It felt so immersive being in the two works and the most recent work. It felt like
Yeah.
really, yeah, there's such an aliveness and a vibrancy to it. It's also
Thank
pretty
you.
spooky.
Oh,
But
thank you.
yeah,
Oh, thank you. No, I just say I wish I had more time because there's so many things that I want to talk about your work and I would have loved to have you read, but maybe I'll have to.
we'll do it another time. We'll meet
Yeah,
again.
yeah,
We'll meet
yeah.
again in this future where I can travel to Paris someday and
Yes.
where there's
I mean,
travel, or you'll come to New York.
near future, I feel like at least travel is going to pick up again. But yeah, no, but definitely I found there's so many like little notes in my drips copy, or even to write as if dead, like things I was like, oh, I have to, this is the same world, or this is parallel, I have to bring this up. And of course, like not.
Well, is someone at Boswell needs to chime in?
Yes.
Oh, hi. Okay.
Hello, I've returned. Thank you. Yes, this has been fantastic. What an engaging afternoon. A meeting behind a meeting, if you will. But yeah, like I say, we do have copies. A couple quick Boswell notes. We've got copies of A Door Behind a Door. Awesome book, wonderful conversation, and we have these lovely book plates that are some of the this is the book plate year. These are some of the best book plates we've had. I want to get these close. You can
That's beautiful.
yeah, it's some of the coolest book plates, and Yelena, that's your artwork as well,
Yes.
right?
It is?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
Very cool.
Yeah.
We also have copies of Drip. Thank you so much for a wonderful
Thank you,
afternoon.
thank you,
Thank
Chris
you.
and Boswell for hosting us. And Yelena,
Yeah.
it's so nice to talk.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kate. Thank you, Boswell. Thank you, all the invisible people. I'm assuming there are thousands, thousands of participants.
Yes, the stadium full of invisible people. I will thank
Yes.
them too, because without them, we would not have a bookstore, virtual or otherwise. Good afternoon, good evening.
Bye.
Bye.